everybody, to the First Name Basis podcast, where we chat with innovators and disruptors about what's going on in tech and in the real world. We try to keep it zero nonsense, so not a sales pitch and no fluff. But with me today, I got some incredible people. I always say it's the best investment I ever made, which is called the Knowledge Society. And so welcome, TKS.
What's up?
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So I got Navid, Jack, and Faith with me today. Navid, why don't you kick it off? Intro yourself.
Yeah, sure, man. So Sheetal and I go back a few years since I moved back to Toronto. I was living in Palo Alto, like Silicon Valley area, running another company called Airpost, which was a cloud security company. That company eventually got acquired by Box.com, a billion-dollar cloud collaboration platform. I ran some teams there, like the big data team, the machine learning team, stuff like that, and did just general stuff in the startup ecosystem. You know, I was like mid-20s, got a company acquired, super excited about startups, and drank all the Kool-Aid and realized that most of the innovation happening in Silicon Valley isn't too exciting. It's not solving any real problems in the world.
Which is a huge statement. That's a huge statement, right? Everybody looks to the Valley thinking we're going to solve all the world's problems and it's going to come from there.
Yeah, I think like if you're curious to know what the Valley is doing or like what people in tech are doing, if you go to producthunt.com, you can see all the new startups coming out, and like 90% of them plus are just like, whatever, it's not exciting.
Sure.
And so when, after talking to a lot of people, what I realized is a lot of older people use, at least this was like 5 years ago, use the word innovation as like a checkbox item. And I don't know how much that's changed right now. Like, Sheetal, you work with companies on innovation all the time, but it's usually like, are we innovating? Yes or no? Did we do this like workshop? Yes or no? But what I found was
the larger the company, the harder it is for them to innovate, which is kind of counterintuitive, because you figure the larger the company, the more the resources, the more they should be able to innovate.
Yeah, it's just like a lot of people in general are scared of risk. And oftentimes what I find is people misinterpret the word risk. They confuse it for uncertainty, but uncertainty does not equal risk. Right? Mm-hmm. Just because you don't know what's going to happen doesn't mean that there's going to be a large downside. That's what risk is, the potential for downside. Uncertainty is just unknown. Right. And one of the big things I realized is a lot of people, regardless of it's in business or TKS students, they confuse risk and uncertainty, and they're completely different things. But so what I found is younger people are more open to uncertainty because they live in uncertainty. Like these guys, like Jack and Faith, have no idea what they're going to do in 20 years from now. Like that's their life. Their life is uncertain. Whereas like when you think about Procter and Gamble or Walmart, like in 20 years, they have a good idea of like what they need, right? What's our projected revenue targets, or at least what do we not want to be doing? Mm-hmm. And so at some, a couple of years into being in the Valley, my brother and I started the Knowledge Society, TKS, which was literally built to just help young people prepare to solve big problems in the world. And it wasn't because Nadeem and I necessarily like loved young people, but it was really because we thought about how do we solve the biggest problems in the world, and then work backwards to figure out how do we develop the people to go solve those problems, because they don't solve themselves, right? Like Google is going to solve a couple problems, but they're also going to make a ton of money on ad search. And that's not like solving cancer is not their number one priority. Even though they created Alphabet to build a lot of cool companies within that. So that's what TKS is.
One of the cool things you said to me was like, hey, the next Elon Musk is the next Elon Musk going to come out of our school system? And you were like, probably not. Right?
Then it was hilarious. Like I asked the TKS Toronto kids this because I ran the Toronto program last year, and I asked them, what do you think the probability is of someone in your school to go impact 1 billion people, or let's say 1 million people? Mm-hmm. And they're like, 1%. I was like, okay, so you think 1 in 100 kids can impact 1 million or 1 billion people? And they're like, oh, no, not 1%. So first of all, there's a math problem going on.
Yeah.
So then asking them, okay, so what do you think it is? And after thinking a lot about it, they're like, probably like 0.001% or
Right.
0.01%. Like that's kind of the range. I don't know, Faith and Jack, if you're thinking about it in your head, what would your answer be to that question? In your school, what's the probability of someone impacting like 1 million or even 1 billion people?
I mean, I completely agree. I think the probability of anyone in my school impacting 1 billion people is pretty low, just because there's a lot of lack of ambition. And even going through TKS, I actually decided to switch schools because I want to be in a place with more ambitious people, people who do want to change the world and have that ability to raise that probability. And they want to actually make a difference. So I think that right now the probability is pretty low, but through TKS, we're getting kids together and we're raising it.
So let's get into this. We're going to peel a layer off the onion and find out how you're doing it. So, Faith, why don't you introduce yourself and how you even got involved in the TKS program?
Great. So I'm Faith Inello. I'm 16 years old, and I'm currently a neurotech and metabolomics researcher, which means I study the brain and specifically the chemical reactions in the brain. And I'm actually looking into adverse childhood experiences and the link between child abuse and adult onset diseases, as well as how we could even possibly cure mental illness in the future. So the way that I got into TKS was I stumbled upon it completely by accident. I saw a YouTube ad, was studying for my exams, thought it might help me pass my English exam, and I looked into it and saw, wow, these are some guys looking at helping kids learn more about STEM, impact billions, change the world, checked all my boxes.
Right.
So I actually decided to apply, ended up hearing back from them, and going into the program, I could not be more pleased. I think it's completely changed my life for the better, and I think that through TKS, I've learned that I do have the ability to make an impact on the world, and I'm learning the tools to do that.
Jack, what about you? Introduce yourself. And
I actually find that pretty funny. I found TKS the exact same way. And Navid, to be honest, I've asked multiple people in my cohort.
It was also YouTube?
Yeah.
It was also YouTube, like an ad?
Also
or
like
what did
a
you see?
YouTube ad.
Well, yeah, because when we were like expanding to other cities, it's really expensive to hire people in those cities, right? So we're like, okay, what's like the way to get in front of like curious young people? Well, social media. So we did like a YouTube and Instagram campaign, and it turns out like people really wanted a program like this just from seeing an ad, which is crazy.
Cool.
Yeah.
So Faith, you're from Boston, and Jack, you were saying you're from Westchester,
New York.
right? New York.
Yeah, just outside the city. But yeah, I guess I'll give my quick intro. So yeah, I'm Jack, guys. I'm a 17-year-old innovator from NYC. And right now I'm particularly focused on the intersection between smart cities and IoT, the Internet of Things. So I actually my parts just arrived for one of my sensors because of COVID, but get on that soon. And yeah, so right now I can't wait to get into that sensor, build something, hopefully impact the cities of the future.
And you're going into an exam right after this podcast, right?
Correct. Yeah.
I love it. Well, thanks for joining us. Faith, you were about to say something. I don't want to cut you off.
Oh, I was just going to say an interesting facet to the YouTube ads is that we've actually found that a lot of the more high achieving students, even in TKS, found it through the YouTube ads. So I thought that was really interesting and funny.
Is that because you guys are like on YouTube, just being curious, trying to learn and from others on there? Is that what was happening?
I think those of us with like more of a drive for curiosity and a passion to constantly be consuming new information do sort of hang out on YouTube in specific channels. So I think through that, those ads were kind of targeted towards us, and we ended up finding more kids through the YouTube ads than I would have thought.
Cool.
Yeah, I was just researching like smaller tech programs that popped up. And then I obviously I don't know if you guys know Kyrgyzstan. That's one I spent a lot of time on. That one's good.
What is that?
It's a
I haven't heard of it.
YouTube channel. They talk a lot about, I guess, some theories and just some cool, I guess, topics in tech, which is really fascinating to learn about.
Cool. So Navid, how does the program work? You guys, I know, started this almost 4 years ago now. And so walk us through how you are different from just everyday school, which is a lot of things, but even how do kids find you? What do you do? What were some of the lessons you learned? How you developed the program?
Hey, you're cheating. That was like a lot of questions.
Yeah, I know. I'm giving you a blank canvas that you can like paint a picture for us.
All right. So let's just start with how the program works. So we have this program, which is called Innovate, which is like the first year program students go into. That's for high school kids like 13 to 17 years old. There's an application process, an interview process before you get accepted.
So how does that? Let's just deep dive a little bit there, because I think it's super cool. I wanted to get my niece into the program, and you were like, "Don't even ask me. She has to go through the regular cadence." Talk a little bit about that. As an investor, I couldn't pull a favor, which I loved.
Yeah, the community is probably one of the most important parts of TKS. And when I was looking at the MOOCs, right, like the online education courses, Udacity, Coursera, Khan Academy, those types of things, they're really great in terms of the content, but there really wasn't something out there that focused on community and people. And I would argue like a lot of schools don't focus enough on that either. It just naturally happens. But these guys are both in the program. They know how much we focus on community and like the emphasis we put on it and all the things we built up within it. And so the people matter a lot. And so when we do our interviews and applications, we're not just screening for like the highest IQ, but we're also looking for, will these people actually contribute back into the community? Will they be helpful? Will they actually thrive in the culture that we build in TKS? And we focus a lot on our culture in TKS. When you look at Facebook and Google or even TribalScale, I mean, your name is literally cultural itself, right? TribalScale. But when you look at schools, there's very little to no focus on the culture of a school. What is our values? What is our mission statement? Whereas when you look at Silicon Valley, that's like a no-brainer for every company that exists there. And so, coming from the Valley, we ingrained culture as like our number one priority within TKS. And so it's not just like Harvard where we're trying to find the smartest kids, but we're trying to find the right fit for people to join the community.
What is the one trait that you find really excels someone to the top of your application process?
So there isn't one trait, which is important because this is probably one of the biggest problems in the education system. It's like a one size fits all model. Whereas like we understand there's different types of people. And so here are a couple of types of people. One type of person is super driven. They're like the hungry kids. They're the kids that join all the clubs in school and like want to be president and all that stuff. So that's like the driven kid, right? And they are driven but lost. They're doing everything, they're joining everything, but they're not really getting anywhere. They're running on treadmills all day. And so TKS gives them the guidance to actually step off the treadmill and actually, run up a mountain and get somewhere. Then there's another type of kid.
Love the analogy.
Then there's another type of kid, which is the curious kid. And this is the kid like Jack that's on Kirkstat all day trying to learn new things, or on Seeker, or like trying to build stuff, or learning how to code, or learning about science, or just learning about the Renaissance. Like, it doesn't matter. They're just curious. They want to learn a bunch of stuff. And these people, again, unguided learning. When you're in school, you're not really learning about a breadth of things. It's only like these categories of things. And so they're on YouTube, they're on Reddit, they're on, I don't know, wherever, just trying to learn stuff. And so those are the curious kids that we help point in the direction of like, here are like very valuable things to learn. And specifically we focus on a lot about exponential technologies, as well as things like philosophy and mental models and stuff like that. And so we kind of help point their curiosity in a certain direction that could pay a lot of dividends in the future. Another type of student is like the student who just wants to be in an environment to thrive with other people. So they're like, where's my tribe? Like, where can I find people to just work with and actually talk to and fit in? Because in school, they don't fit in. They're like the odd one out. If you want to, and I'm sure like these guys can comment on it, but like if you want to go and make an impact on the world, or build something interesting, or talk about a interesting topic, that's not what makes you cool, right? The cool kid is not the one who has like a strong opinion on how we should be using nuclear fusion in the future, right? Like, that's
I argue that now. I mean, the cool kid for me is definitely that now. But yeah, I totally get it. For us,
in the real world, that's the crazy thing. Like,
I love chatting with like Faith and Jack and realizing how stupid I was at 16 and 17.
Yeah, and we should shut up soon and let them talk more, because they're definitely more interesting than us. But it's how like those kids who want to find that tribe of people and appreciate that and grow together and learn together. That's like another type of student. And so it isn't that what's the one thing, but it's like, does this person fit into a category where they can thrive in our ecosystem? And it's funny because like some parents get upset that their kid wasn't accepted to TKS and like, my kid's so smart, like they're doing this, they're doing that, but they don't understand like TKS is not like university. It's not a place where you just get filtered. It's a place where you grow. And that's probably one of the big things that I would say about the education system is I think we're probably leaning towards more on it's a place where you filter rather than it's a place where you grow. And I think that's something we should probably, look at again from, K to 12 to universities and colleges. What do we want it to be? Do we want these institutions to be places where people can grow and thrive, or places where people get filtered to go to the next level? High school, you get filtered to go to university. University, you get filtered to go to a job. But where in that path do you actually thrive and figure out like what you're passionate about, what you love doing, what skills do you have to contribute value in society?
So Faith, let me go to you. When you first got into TKS, did you know this is what you wanted to do? Did you know that this was the area of study you wanted to go in? Like, how did that work out for you?
So I've always loved the brain just because I'm desperate to always be understanding things like, why am I thinking like this? Why do people experience anxiety attacks? Things like that. But going into TKS, I wasn't at all aware of how much I would grow or how much I'd be exposed to. I went into the program thinking it's another one of those weekend classes, maybe something I could put on a resume, maybe something that looked good. I didn't know a ton about it. As soon as we went in, we start learning about nanotechnology, quantum computing, bacteriophages, and I'm around all these other kids, kind of like Navid said, where I'm in a tribe of people who understand me, who get me, and they also want to be changing the world through these technologies, learning and growing. I mean, a group project in TKS is completely different than a group project at school. I live for like team projects in TKS compared to, the idea that when you're doing a group project at school and you're just taking the lead and that kind of thing. I think that especially with my idea of what I wanted to do through neuroscience and through the brain, that's definitely evolved over the course of the program and over the course of Innovate as I learned more about different things. When I first learned about metabolomics, I picked it up because I thought it would help me do better in my chem class.
What is metabolomics? You gotta explain.
No, it's so cool. So metabolomics is the study of every single chemical reaction that happens in your body. And there's 37 trillion chemical reactions that happen at any given second. I can actually show you some of the projects I've been working on when we get a chance with metabolic pathway analysis and some of the other things that I'm doing to understand the brain and even how child abuse is affecting different things.
Yeah. Really cool. Really cool. Jack, what about you? You started at TKS. What was like the first impression when you got in there? What did you start learning? How did it shape you? And like, as Navid said, take you off the treadmill and start making you go up that mountain.
Yeah. So before TKS, just like Faith, I didn't really know very specifically what I wanted to go into. I generally had a passion for tech and entrepreneurship. But once I found TKS, I was like, I think this is going to be tremendously transformative. So I went in, we have something called Explores, and we'll explore like each tech topic and then choose to delve deeper into one, like a focus. So I chose to do IoT, and that's where I found my passion for the Internet of Things and delve deeper into that. So I think like originally, very broad understanding, but going into TKS, you get to delve deeper into all these crazy topics that you'd never learn in school and you'd never know, I feel like, otherwise. So it's been a tremendous experience.
Go ahead,
and even in the TKS method, I think like the idea of doing explores and then a focus, I've taken that on and applied it to even homework and projects I'm doing at school, because I sort of loved school before TKS, and then TKS showed me how insane school was and how there are so many different ways I can kind of hack the system and understand how to do better while also working less to just conform to the system. And I think that with the idea that I can kind of treat my homework like an explorer, I can make my chemistry homework about the brain, or I can talk about an article in math class where blind people understand math better. Insane things where I'm just connecting to my teachers on a whole different level because of the new way that I'm thinking about learning and my perspective on how to grow and how to understand things.
That's awesome. So Navid, let me go to you here, because you end up going through this amazing application process. You end up getting these really curious kids. You start teaching them about different things, and then what is the next step? Like, what is the next step of the program, and what you've seen really starts to accelerate their rise up that mountain?
I think it goes back to that one size fits all thing. This is something that I've been thinking a lot about in terms of, on one side, motivation, and on the other side, what is success? And I ended up writing this post internally within TKS about what is success in TKS, because everyone was trying to look for an answer. When you think about life, it's very clear what societal success is. How much money do you have, right? How many followers do you have on Instagram? It's like,
that's success these
fame
days.
And societal success, right? Like, that's what people would define as success for you. Even for a company, it's like, how much money are you making? What's your revenue? How much money did you raise from investors?
I hate that one. How much have you raised? Like, that's not success. Anyway.
And so we just thought about, like, how do we want to define success for us, not let someone else define success? And then how do we let the students define success for themselves? And so that really what it comes down to, like, we're not judging our success on what university they got into. Like, I could honestly care less. What I care about is, have you found something that gets you excited to wake up in the morning? Like, have you found something you're passionate about? Have you built authentic, meaningful relationships during the program with people? Like, do you have people you can go to?
So Jack, let's go there. What relationships have you built besides even just the other students in the program? Because I know you guys are sharks. You get laser focused at who you're going to go after, and you get some amazing people to have conversations with you. Because you also, you can't say no to, like, an awesome 16 and 17-year-old kid who's comes well prepared to come talk to you.
Yeah, it's crazy. The amount of connections I've gotten from this year is absolutely absurd. I think one of the biggest things I learned was definitely, like, using the directors we have for our cities is really, really useful. They'll help you out with anything you need, and they'll talk to any of the people they know and connect you with them, get you an interview, or just any meetup to get more knowledge in your focus. So one big thing for me this year was actually visiting Sidewalk Labs. They're an Alphabet company working in, like, the smart city industry. They're working on making skyscrapers out of timber, which is pretty interesting. So my director, Mike, actually linked me with the head of engineering there. So I got to connect with him, cold emailed him, went into the city, met up, and he gave me a tour of the office, and I got to learn a ton. So that was awesome. Just one of the cool connections I've got from TKS, which is amazing.
Awesome. Faith, what about you?
I think for me, a giant thing that happened for me through TKS was I finally, found friends who were on my level. They understood everything I was going for, and they wanted to go for their dreams and their passions with me. And that was eye-opening. That was what made me feel like I'm not going to settle for a school where I'm just kind of going through the motions. I want to be somewhere, and I want to constantly be in environments where I'm around other people who want to be doing things and going for what they're passionate about. So that was one giant realization I had, and I'm so grateful for the friends I have in TKS. And then two, through TKS, I never knew I could have a LinkedIn at 16. Like, that never even crossed my mind. So as we started doing, we do a lot of challenges through TKS. One of the first ones we did was with Techstars Boston, where we were doing a consulting challenge. And I was having meetings with founders and startup mentors 5 times a day for, I think, 3 weeks. And I just ended up expanding my network and learning so much from these mentors and experts who just wanted to help us and even wanted to invest into us if we ever created a startup or something like that. I know that from my reach outs to different ethicists and different biologists, I actually have the opportunity to talk on conferences and even talk to Sir Richard Roberts, who is a Nobel Prize winning biochemist, which is something I aspire to be. So I think that as you kind of level up and you understand that what you put into the program, that's what you get out of it. So as you realize that you can reach out to people, you want that boss mentality where you can just go up and ask people, hey, I'm 16, I want to learn from you and I want to show you what I'm doing. It opens so many doors.
So Faith, you said two words there that I love that a lot of TKS kids say to me, and that's boss mentality. Define boss mentality for me.
Totally. So I actually do a lot with boss mentality because I'm using that as I'm leading a Boss Ladies initiative within TKS. And my definition of boss mentality is walking into a room and owning who you are, regardless of other societal ideals that may say otherwise. So I think that as a kid and as someone who's so passionate about always working and doing science research and that kind of thing, you may not be the most like popular kid at school, or you may not be the one that everyone's hanging out with, you may not be the jock, whatever, but if you walk into a room and you own who you are, automatically like you're likable, you smile, you talk to people. If you just make yourself like socially aware and you know who you are and you're firm in that, people are attracted to that. They want to talk to you more, they want to be your friend. So I was kind of a timid kid before TKS, didn't really like to talk to people, didn't really like public speaking. But once I started to understand my worth and I understood that I have a voice and I can use it to inspire people, everything changed for me.
That's amazing. I love that. I always say, your weakness that you think is your weakness is probably your strength. And for you to go leverage that and get into a room and actually own yourself, absolutely, you become this magnet.
Totally.
You become this lightning rod that people just get attracted to and want to go talk to and learn more. And you actually own who you are, and that's awesome. And at your age, I remember me being at your age. That's something really tough to do. I'm Jack. What is like? So, boss mentality is like one type of characteristic. Tell me a different characteristic.
Yes. So I definitely think like TKS, it's not just about learning about the emerging technologies. One of the biggest things that I've learned through TKS is the mindsets. It's completely transformed not just my mindset with boss mentality, but I think one of my favorites was anti-fragility, which is learning to like take in feedback and put yourself in stressful or uncomfortable situations. And from that, you ultimately grow like dramatically.
Right.
So whether it's getting up on stage or what we call a knowledge drop,
or doing this podcast with a knucklehead like me.
Exactly. Just getting up there, putting yourself out there, and learning to take in feedback and be comfortable with being uncomfortable. So,
love it.
That's one of my favorites too.
Well said. Well said. Yeah, putting yourself in uncomfortable situations and failing. Navid, you've been running this program for a while now. Some of the kids are older. What have they moved on to do? Like, tell us what's happening.
So I'll tell you a couple things what kids are doing, but even with that, I would still say, I still think they're truly successful or like there when they feel accomplished with what they're doing. And right now I can tell you about what they're doing, but I'll also tell you that they don't feel there yet because they actually want to go. They still
feel there's a higher peak on the mountain. Yeah.
This is still like part of their journey. But I think other people like listen to this and go like, wow, like they've already been successful. And it's like, no, this is just the beginning of their journeys. So we got, how do I even think, where do I start? So we got
so many.
We got Hannah, who moved from Vietnam when she was 16, moved to Canada from Vietnam, joined TKS in like her first year, I think back in Toronto. This is like in 2016, I think. She was really interested in gene editing. And at the time she thought she was going to take like the PhD path, spend like 10 plus years in gene editing. Anyways, cut scene, she ended up working at the Davidson lab in Toronto, which is working on anti-CRISPR, which is one of the leading labs in the world for gene editing in that specific domain. Then eventually moved on to lead a team of PhDs and master students when she was like in her early years.
She was leading the team.
Yeah, at like 17, early 18 years old, leading a team of PhDs and master students because she was the only one on the team that had the intersection between genomics and machine learning. So, you heard about this explore focus thing in TKS. She had a focus in machine learning and a focus in genomics. And so she had that intersection that no one else had. So she was leading that team.
Talk about putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation. Hey, PhDs, I am now leading you.
but she had boss mentality.
She had boss mentality. I love it. Yeah.
So then she decided that she wanted to learn more about execution rather than research. And so she ended up, we have a partnership with Next 36, which is an accelerator program in Toronto, to start companies and get funded and everything, which, you know about Sheetal. So Hannah was the youngest student accepted in Next 36 this year, and she went and started a company in the real estate space. And so in that domain, which she has no experience in, she ended up building a company in that, and it's doing really, really well. And so now she's the founder and CEO of a real estate tech startup that's crushing it.
Amazing.
Another kid, Ben Nashman, who was really passionate about physics and the intersection between physics and health. He ended up starting a company called Synex Medical, which just closed 8 million USD raise from some of the smartest people in the Valley. I don't know if I'm allowed to say their names, but the people running the top accelerator startup program in the world that has a letter in it plus
Y Combinator. Okay, let's go on.
After that, so people that are like running that and other extremely successful startup founders. I think the CEO of Neuralink or president of Neuralink is also an investor. So just some incredible people. And he's just opening up an office in Boston as well this year. So he'll have a Toronto and Boston office. He's just like, he's turning 20 or something like that. He's like one of our oldest alumni, by the way. So our oldest alumni is like at that 20 years old level.
Right.
I'll give you one more.
They started at like 16, 17 with you, and now they're
20. He was in our very first program when we started in Toronto, our very first Toronto program. And then I'll give you the last one. So Jay, he's one of our students. He started doing some stuff in robotics and machine learning. So trying to make autonomous like vegetable and fruit pickers, because that industry is like insanely high turnover, costs a lot of money to employ people to just like pick mushrooms, for example. And so he built a autonomous way to like pick mushrooms and identify if they were done yet. And it's actually very difficult. Then he moved on to solar panels. And then he also he was actually one of the first ones to start a company in TKS. So he started a company called Corally, which was a sales tool. He ended up growing Corally and getting it acquired. So his company Corally got acquired. And then he got a job offer from this really smart dude, Mike Del Basso, who's also a friend of my brother's, Nadim. And Mike was the former head of machine learning at Uber in San Francisco. And so Mike left Uber and started a startup called Tekton, which actually helps companies enhance and advance their machine learning capabilities.
Sure.
And so they raised a ton of money from Andreessen Horowitz. And Mike was one of the people on Jay's newsletter. So if you guys are in TKS, you'll know how we do newsletters, right?
Oh, I know. I get great Sunday reading. I just save them all and then on Sunday start scrolling.
Yeah. So Mike was on Jay's newsletter for like 2 years or something like that. And after the acquisition, Mike basically brought Jay onto his team at Tekton. So Jay moved to Silicon Valley and started working with that startup, right? This Andreessen-backed
and how old is Jay now?
Company, like turning 20 or something like that. Like he was in Ben's cohort.
So he's not doing university.
Yeah, so you caught on to that. So yeah, both of them actually ended up taking a pause from university, and I think a lot of parents and kids are scared about,
it's like the safety net.
These kids
it's like almost
out?
A safety net, right? If you need it to.
Well, what I would say is like this is just my general advice to people is don't drop out of university unless you have a very compelling reason to. And Mark Zuckerberg's a great example of that, right? Like he wasn't planning on dropping out of college. It's just Facebook was growing so much that he had to drop out. And that's actually what we did with Ben. So Ben was growing Synex while he was in his first year of university. But by the time second year came, there was just way too much happening that there was no way he could balance both. And so he went all in on Synex, his company. That was the same thing with Jay. He actually went hard on quarterly during the summer after his first year. He was starting quarterly during his first year of university, and then in summer he went full time on it, but then ended up getting it acquired, getting this job offer, which like most people's best case scenario isn't even working in Silicon Valley with the former head of machine learning that's started an Andreessen Beck company, right? That's right. Most people in university, that's not even their best case scenario. So I think one thing we talk about in TKS is how do you create your best worst case scenario and then not do that so you can just optimize for your best case scenario.
Love it.
So that's kind of what, that's the advice I try to give.
Awesome. Well, we were talking to go on shrooms, and talking about shrooms, Faith, I'm coming to you because you said you got some stuff to share with us, and there's been a lot of research now on like, you see it all the time now. You see like psychedelics and stuff being used to like solve mental disorders, and all these things that were really taboo before are now being introduced, and medical testing ways of being able to solve a lot of human challenges that we all go through. So share with us what you're working on. Like, you got some stuff to share? Let's listen in.
Totally. So actually going off of that, I mean, I haven't actually done a lot of work with psychedelics or anything like that, but because I've had so much free time in quarantine, I did end up watching a documentary on Netflix about how people are actually starting to use LSD to overcome childhood trauma and that kind of thing. And I'm really interested in childhood trauma and understanding it and helping people work through it, just because I've seen my friends and I've seen other people my age struggling with mental illness so seriously in high school. And it's something I'm really passionate about working towards better treatment for, because mental illness treatment is not one size fits all. And it's really hard, especially when you're this young, to even understand what's happening in the brain, to even get an affordable treatment method. So what I've really been working on, and I can share my screen as I show you, is past couple months, I did get very deep into neurotechnology, but the project I've gone the deepest on was actually my work into adverse childhood experiences. So there's about 10 of them, and they range from different forms of neglect to physical, emotional, sexual abuse, everything from a parent dying to a parent overdosing, things like that. Those are all ACEs. And the more you have, the more you're actually predisposed to adult onset diseases like diabetes, heart failure, lots of awful things. So I think a lot of medicine today, they treat what's known as like what I would say are the symptoms of the problem, whereas diabetes may actually be a symptom of a greater problem where the root cause is actually stemming from an issue with DNA methylation, where someone was experiencing chronic stress for so long that the pathways in their brain just fundamentally shifted. I'll share with you a pathway.
That's really interesting, because we always, one of the things, especially our generation, our generation grew up just being like, shut up and get over it, right? Like it's very interesting to see, hey, there's science behind this as to why you may be predisposed to a certain condition, which is interesting.
There is.
Yeah, what are we looking at here?
So this is actually a pathway I mapped myself. I'll try to move this so I can hopefully, I don't know what I pressed, hopefully give you a larger picture. So this is one of the first projects I worked on, and I've continually been building off it from, I think, November. And this is actually the catecholamine biosynthesis pathway. Scary word, I know, but it's really just about the stress response on the body. So when the body experiences a stress, you have the fight or flight response. And in that response, your brain releases certain hormones and certain metabolites, which are really just chemicals that either trigger your sympathetic nervous system or your parasympathetic nervous system. So what I mapped out using Pathways, which is a great, it's kind of old, but it's a great metabolic pathway diagramming software. And I looked at how we could take these tiny molecules, and I mapped it from L-tyrosine, which is one of the initial molecules used in the HPA axis and the stress response. And I mapped how through that, it ends up producing dopamine, norepinephrine, which is noradrenaline, and epinephrine, which is adrenaline. So when you understand the functions and how the stress response causes all of these metabolites to continually be produced, they get stuck in your body's system, and it causes chronic inflammation and even changes the way certain processes work. I mean, I was actually just looking this morning at how chronic stress and even chronic sugar intake, which is another thing I'm working on, can cause ATP levels to rise in the blood. And when your ATP levels are high for a long time, it changes the function of your mitochondria on a fundamental level, which means it's actually changing the way your body handles energy production. So through that project, I'll open up another browser now. We were actually, me and a friend, we've been
We're going to go
working
back to
on
your
this.
Spotify playlist after.
I'm not sure what was there,
It's
but
all
me
good.
and a
It's all
friend
good.
were actually, we were
No,
studying
this is
startup.
really interesting. I'm like,
Thank you.
This is really, really interesting.
One thing actually that we worked on through TKS is moonshot projects, where we look at building a startup or company that will impact billions. And me and another student from TKS, Mikey Taylor, shout out to him, he's amazing. We were looking at how the neurotech market and even the mental health treatment market is so messed up, where there's millions of dollars going into drug development and these drugs just aren't working for people. We're taking the wrong approach. So through that, can you still see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Great. We developed NeuroJoy. So with NeuroJoy, our mission is to spread lasting joy one neuron at a time. And I'll skip a few slides, but we actually are looking to, over the summer, and we're actually in touch with a couple mentors who want to help us develop this from MIT and from some other places. We want to have an algorithm that can predict depressive thoughts. So we're actually looking at using different brain waves to understand depressive thoughts and track them, and then trigger magnetoelectric particles within the brain using ligands, which are basically just molecules used in signaling different neurons to either activate or stop certain processes. So when we have a BCI headset that is using an algorithm to understand these brain waves and predict depressive thoughts or even panic attacks before they occur, it can activate a local electric field, causing these particles to either initialize these ligands or cause the ligands to stop a process from occurring, hopefully stopping depressive thoughts before they occur. That's one wearable device I'm working on. And then I actually have a pitch competition or a practice pitch competition in less than an hour, where I'm working on Exonally, which is a wearable that we're using to track metabolites in sweat to stop panic attacks before they occur. So let me see if I can show you the product development there. So we're doing a pitch competition with the University of Toronto soon, where we're having a wearable technology that will actually, that's our competition, never mind. But our product will actually address these mental health issues through the hormones that are released when you sweat. So one of the biochemical responses of a panic attack or something like that is metabolites are released through your sweat. And when we see those and we're able to track them through the wearable, completely external, nothing invasive or anything like that, we could actually cause the wearable, we haven't figured out its exact function yet, but to produce a response that will decrease the panic attack or stop it completely before it occurs.
Wow.
Also,
that is,
so that Jack has time to share.
Yeah. No, that is absolutely amazing. I'm going to have to make sure that we just do a whole podcast just on that. I mean, I talk about I talk about my mental health pretty openly, and I do that just to set an example and say, hey, like everybody goes through shit, and like, hey,
everybody does,
everybody
and it shouldn't
does,
be something that's so stigmatized.
Absolutely. And especially, I think with especially a lot of founders, I think with all the stresses and burdens that they put on, they always put on this shining armor that is not necessarily that shiny. So I would love for you to, like, you and I could deep dive way more into it. Very interesting.
Anytime, just let me know.
I will, for sure. Jack, talk to me about smart cities, man.
Cool. Yeah, you mentioned the moonshot. That was definitely my favorite project of the year for TKS. Mine was a bit different from IoT. My group actually focused on BCIs, so brain-computer interfaces.
Love that.
Similar, yeah. We focused on a little bit of mental health as well. But I can share my screen here later on, but I'll just give a brief intro to it. But we called it Mindset, and it was a wearable technology to track people's like emotions and their fatigue levels throughout the day. And then it would be connected to an app, and based on their fatigue and stress levels at certain points in the day, they'll be like, hey, you have high stress levels here. Why don't you take a break at this time? And we did that to increase their productivity levels while they're working in the office. So yeah, that was one of the applications. And then another, we talked about how this could help with mental health and in healthcare, doctors identifying if someone has a issue or needs to see a therapist.
Right.
And then we also had a final one. Me being the IoT specialist, I was like, okay, I got to get IoT in here somehow.
Yeah.
So I was like, why don't we connect it to kind of off to the smart home world, I was like, why don't we connect it to devices at home? Maybe you're turning on the lights just with your brain or stuff like that.
Okay.
So I'll share my screen here. We made a website. We were required to do that. Here, let me know if you can see that.
Cool. And just for the audio listeners here, the website is mindsetcorp.tech.
Yep. So this is what we did. We created a quick mock-up, but basically we were trying to have the smart home concept, like I said, the cognitive biometrics authentication, and then the augmented mental alertness. So basically we're trying to track, monitor, and then give back feedback based on your brain waves, pretty much.
Really
But
cool.
yeah, that was the moonshot. Another thing I wanted to show, actually, let's see. I did a podcast series with two professionals. One was a futurist, a lead futurist with the company called Future Think.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked a bit about where he saw cities in the future, like in 2050. And one thing I found really interesting talking with him was not just the IoT applications, but he talked about parks, and he talked about something called what he called parklets, and it was like movable parks. So you'd be able to like move sections or plots of a park or playground and then change the functionality of it. So that could change just both the accessibility if you want to, I don't know, maybe create a road there or put a building there sometime else for the future. So it's kind of like a movable city where you can adapt and change to different environments as the population grows or whatever.
Jack, give a shout out to your podcast. What's it called? How do people find it?
Oh, so this is just, a small YouTube channel. I created this. It's just, you can look up, I guess, Jack Bodell, or just what will a 2050 city look like? That's the title of one of the podcasts.
Nice.
So yeah.
What's another key takeaway from what a 2050 city will look like? What's like the most dramatic change you think we will see?
Yeah. So it's tough, but I think from Gary Golden, the futurist I spoke with, he said population's definitely a major thing. It's going to be tight, cramped spaces, and we're going to need to learn to, like he said, make cities like changeable and adaptable. So as cities grow, we're going to have to make either go underground or make skyscrapers out of different materials that can adapt and change to different populations and different traffic congestion in different areas.
Very interesting takeaway. That's a whole other podcast too. We're going to have to do one too. That's awesome.
And as for Jack's work and my work, we can also send you the links to our portfolios if any of your viewers are interested in looking at more of what we've done.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's we'll post all the links into our descriptions on this podcast, so they could definitely check out more of the work that you guys are doing. So Navid, what comes next? What is the big transition for TKS now that you've been doing it for a while, to say, hey, here's what we're going to alter and change and reinvent ourselves as well?
So there's I would categorize 3 buckets. The first bucket is supporting our existing students. And so as they, get older and start projects and companies, we want to create our own venture arm to be first money in and financially support them and our alumni to do
Absolutely.
awesome things.
Absolutely. I've told all of your alumni, I can't even think of one yet, being like, hey, give me a shout when it's time to write a check. Right.
Yeah. So creating that venture arm. The second thing that we're focused on is expansion. So, our website is tks.world because we want to be a global organization. And so right now we have in-person programs in New York, Boston, Toronto, Ottawa, Vegas, LA, and Vancouver. And we have
the expansion is just unreal, man. Congrats. Yeah. Congrats. Comes with a lot of challenges, as you know. But that is just unreal. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we just also opened up TKS Virtual, which is our online program that's 100% online. You'll get a lot of the experience from TKS Virtual. It's not going to be the same as in person. And I think for the students that have been in person, know some of the benefits of being in person, which includes obviously the sessions, but also the company tours and extra stuff. that's included when you're in like one city. But we have like kids from around the world that apply to our virtual program: Indonesia, Denmark, Nepal, Nigeria. It's nuts. Like, it's actually nuts. Like, around the world, Brazil, it's crazy.
Amazing.
So that's the second piece. And then the third piece right now, I'm thinking about an interesting project, not necessarily project, but literally the future of education for the masses. So right now, TKS is not for the masses, right? We are really for people who want to solve really big problems in the world and make a really big impact. And that is not everybody. I would say that's actually the minority of people. But at the same time, one of the things that I'm still thinking about is, what is the solution for everybody? How do we unlock global human potential? How do we raise the bar in order of magnitude and see what we're capable of? And so this summer, I'm spending some time thinking about how I want to execute on some of the ideas I have on that level, right? Doing TKS for the last 4 years, knowing how young people think, understanding how the real world works, and knowing our capabilities with technology. I have like some very strong ideas and hypotheses on how we can do this. And so I'm going to be testing some stuff this summer.
Very cool. Jack, I don't want to keep you, brother. I know you got an exam. So I want you to give a couple final words, and then you could drop off, and we'll keep going for a little bit longer. But if you had some advice, I'm going to ask you 2 questions. The first one is, if you had some advice for curious kids, kids who are kind of like you or a good fit for the program, what's your advice to them on how they should get involved?
Well, obviously, definitely check out TKS. But yeah, I think it's been a really transformative year, not just like I said before, not just with the knowledge I've gained, but just like my mentality as a whole. Like, I used to be really, I guess I'd say I'm pretty shy. I used to be really shy, but from learning the mindsets about boss mentality and just putting yourself out there with anti-fragility, you really change about like your mentality about what you can do as a teenager. And like, just this year, I've learned about AI, IoT, BCIs, just crazy stuff like that I never thought I'd be doing as a teenager. And like, speaking on a podcast with the CEO of TribalScale, that's crazy to me. I can't believe I'm doing this right now.
I'm not that big of a deal, dude. you're gonna do podcasts with much smarter people than me, I promise that.
Hopefully. But yeah, just to all those kids out there, like, I'd say, believe in yourself and figure out, just research and look up stuff, and you'll learn a tremendous amount of knowledge and be able to do whatever you want.
And here's a question for you. Most of our listeners are enterprise listeners who are working in large enterprises. What's your advice to them on how they should innovate? Because we always find the enterprise is so slow to move and innovate. What's the one thing you would tell them?
It's actually funny because my mom, she speaks about that a lot. She talks about making everything simple and eliminating complexity. So in the workspace, I think it's good just being indoctrinated by my mom. She's like, eliminate all the complexities in the workspace, make everything simple, easy to read for your customer, and from there, success will come. So that's what I'd say. Just make everything simple, and eliminate the unnecessary complexities.
Awesome. Thanks, brother. Jack, go crush your exam. We know you will.
Thank you. Yeah.
Good
luck, Jack.
I'll do it. All right. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, take care. Faith, as you're going on this pathway of looking at solving a lot of these I'm going to call, for lack of a better term, you have a bunch of brain theories that you're testing. What are the ways that you're actually going and testing your hypotheses? Like, what are some of the easy steps that not easy, but what are some of the simple steps, as Jack said, like, make things very clear that you started to take?
Definitely. So I think that a lot of it is hard just because without access to a wet lab, without access to an actual brain to do experiments on, there's not a ton of physical work I can do, but I do run a lot of simulations online. I'm comparing different metabolic pathways all the time. I'm reading research papers. I'm building my hypotheses based off of other things I'm reading and connections I'm making. Because I'm not just looking at metabolomics and I'm not just looking at neuroscience. I'm looking at all sorts of different things. I mean, NeuroJoy it came out of a nanotech idea. It didn't even come out of a specific brain idea. We were passionate about the nanotechnology. We were passionate about treating currently untreatable mental conditions, and that's how that came about. So I think the way that I go about proving any hypotheses I have is, one, I look for verification and confirmation within different research studies that have already taken place. One thing that I talk to the directors of the Boston cohort a lot about is that a lot of the studies that have taken place in reference to the brain are really hard to replicate, or when they do replicate them again, they get different results. So you do have to be a little bit choosy with what data sets you're using and how you're analyzing the information you're getting. But at the end of the day, if I can find some research papers and they all corroborate, and then I'm also seeing, okay, yeah, that lines up with what I was thinking. Okay, yeah, that lines up with some pathway I just learned or some algorithm I just ran on this data set. It's really just about the simulation at this point. But as I continue with my work and as I possibly get an internship at a lab, I know I'm working with Harvard Med Science with my school next year, actually, which is amazing. Super excited for that.
Cool.
But I think it's just about the digital verification at first, where you're looking at simulations and then you're actually moving on to physical trials and that kind of thing. I do have a question for you, though.
All right, go for it. Actually, I just want to recap what you just said real quickly, because I take it into like our corporate world ideology, and it's really about being able to go and take a complex problem and start doing a lot of small little tests, and you start learning from each one of those small little tests, and you're going to start to put together a methodology that's going to end up working for you, or at least guide you towards the right solution. But sure, go ahead, ask me a question.
Well, my question for you is, I've actually been doing a side project where I'm looking at the effects of COVID-19 on different industries. Specifically, I was actually looking at the pharmaceutical industry and clinical drug development. So I'm wondering, how do you think this pandemic and quarantine in general is going to affect startups and business development in the future?
I think that a lot of innovation happens in tough situations, right? Like diamonds come out of hard pressure situations. And so if you look just from like previous recessions that we've had a lot of innovation happen. And I think the companies or the ideas that are going to survive this pandemic are going to be the ones that really reinvent themselves to be able to deal with this new world that we're going in. And one of the biggest challenges I think most organizations are going to have is really collaboration. Gone are the days where it's easy enough to just grab 10 smart people, go in a room with a whiteboard. So what are you going to do to over communicate and be able to communicate and test these small little hypotheses, like your little hypotheses that you have, so that you could actually come to a proper conclusion and be able to do that in a more of a distributed manner. Human nature is always just to like sit around with each other, have a conversation, and like start to figure things out. But now that you can't necessarily have that direct human contact, how are you going to be able to invent yourself to go and do that? So that I think is more of a human problem rather than a technology problem that's going to be able to solve it. However, I also think that this is going to be able to create a lot of opportunities and actually be able to kill off a lot of industries or old ways of doing things that didn't necessarily make sense before the pandemic, and now that it's here, it's going to go by the wayside. And sometimes you gotta trim your hedge or your bush to make it grow and look nicer and prettier, and these types of things need to happen in a cyclical way so that you end up coming out of it stronger. So I think a lot of companies are going to have, look, even us, we've had to reinvent ourselves, and we've been restructuring for over a year now, our own organization. And this pandemic came, and we're like, thank God we did a lot of that restructuring work before this pandemic hit, because it still put us in a strong position as we continue forward. So I think you're going to see a lot of companies and a lot of industries having to do some soul searching to really figure out how they could move to the next step of their journey to go to the top of the mountain in a very different way, in a different world. Navid, how would you answer that?
In like which specific part of the question?
Like how do you see after the pandemic, or even during this pandemic, what's going to be required for these large industries to reinvent themselves?
I think I think culture is probably the thing that I think about a lot. When I look at what Twitter's doing, what Shopify's doing, a lot of the work from home stuff,
We're doing that too.
I think there are a lot of benefits to that, but at the same time, when you look back and think about why Google and Twitter and Facebook invested so much money into their offices and their work environment, I think it's because they wanted to attract top talent, and top talent wanted to be in that kind of environment, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you've ever been to Facebook in Silicon Valley, they have like an ice cream store there. They have free lunches every day. They have snacks everywhere. They have places to hang out. At Google, there's like a volleyball net, or there's multiple volleyball nets there. There's games areas. And I think all of that, again, attracts top talent. And one thing I've been thinking about is, in the next world that's distributed, how do you attract and retain top talent? And I think your corporate culture and community is if it's either the most important thing or second to your actual company's mission and product. And I think for some people it might alternate back and forth. But focusing on how to actually execute that, I think, is going to be more important than ever. I think many companies outside of the Bay Area may have not thought as much about culture, whereas now being distributed, I think we have to think about it, because it's not naturally just going to happen in the workspace.
That's interesting you say that. I think, we just did a study, and over 70% of our people actually want to come back to some sort of forum in the office. And so we're looking to say, okay, what could we do from a blank whiteboard? Like, what does that mean? It doesn't mean you want to sit at your desk all day and just do your job, although some people do want to get out of the house and build a routine to do that. But what does the office of the future really mean for you? What can you do to build that culture to do it the right way? And you and I chat about this all the time. Like, what do we want to get out of the physical space that we're creating?
Yeah, when I was at Box, there was a whole day that was a GSD day, right? Get stuff done day. And you weren't supposed to schedule meetings that day.
Yeah.
And then on my team specifically, we had one day that was like a work from anywhere day. And when you think about it, that's like 2 out of 5 work days that were already remote technically. I mean, a lot of people didn't do it exactly, but what I kind of think happening is the office space will be the place to collaborate. And I think if for some people it's going to be a place to go to focus. So I think in the office space, there's probably going to be an area which is like a library. It's like, go here to focus.
Sure.
And then I think there's going to be a large area where it's going to be here's where you collaborate, but I'm not sure it's going to be, here's your desk. I don't know if in offices it makes sense to say, here's your desk where you stay at, work at, and collaborate at. I think there's going to be a separate space for like focusing, and I think a separate space for collaborating. And then people will come to the office with intention. Am I coming today because I want to collaborate, or am I coming today because I want to focus? And I think redesigning the workspace based off of those two states seems to make a lot of sense.
Faith, another thing.
What's great is
Sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, what's great about that is we also actually kind of have that built into TKS, where we have this virtual platform where there was a big emphasis on building that virtual community from the beginning, where we have our own Slack channels and we're constantly reacting, giving other innovates feedback, things like that. But we also have the physical TK space where we do TK space, TK stand up, TK anything. So with the TKS space, what's great about that is we can come and we can work together, but we can also practice presenting in an environment with our peers. We can do group projects. We can focus, hackathons. It's crazy how Navid and Deem have worked the physical space part of TKS, but they've also taken that and transferred that as things have gone more virtual. And they've been able to instill that even through the TKS virtual initiative, where we've been doing our sessions online and we've been working through Zoom and that kind of thing.
Yes, we had Raj here from the Loop team, whose startup is actually just focused on distributed teams and how you can work more efficiently. And one of the biggest takeaways was having your right rituals and setting your cadences for what why that cadence exists and why it's important to attend it and what you need to bring to that particular cadence, whether that be your daily stand-ups or, hey, if it's just even a Zoom room where people could just log in and be virtually connected and just working and not necessarily even have something to say. It's just being around others, and being able to do things like that. And he's built, the Loop Team software to bring a lot of the shoulder tap type conversation stuff that happens, to enhance collaboration. But the one biggest thing I noticed, and we've been practicing going distributed and more work from home for over a year now, is that you have to have that self-starter mentality. You can't be some people could go into an office, and I'm one of them, where I go into an office, I feed off the energy of everybody else, and off I go and then do my day. And that's much harder to do when you're distributed, and it's much harder to do over Zoom or Google Meet or whatever you are doing. So finding the right triggers to make you actually get motivated and have your GSD moment of just of making sure your accomplishments are happening, you really have to have that self-starter mentality, and finding the right triggers that are going to make you get into that headspace is something I'm really starting to explore, to say, hey, I know what works for me, but how could I help others on our team really get that spark? Because I saw that spark in the office, and it's much harder to do now that we're distributed. So
We call it the day one mindset.
The day one mindset. Yeah,
Yes.
I love it. All right. Guys, we're going to start wrapping up here. So I want to go to you first, Faith. What are some key takeaways you would like students who are listening to the podcast to, just like before, same question. What's your advice to other students?
This is something I've thought about a lot, actually, as I've been talking to my friends who are also interested in TKS and applying. I think one thing that a lot of adults have always told us is that you work hard at school, and then you go to college, and when you graduate, that's when you start to do something with your life. I think there's also a lot of stigma around kids kind of accomplishing things and doing things and actually making a difference this early on in our lives. So one thing I want to tell students is that you are never too young to start pursuing your passions and making a difference. Take that course on Khan Academy, start learning Python, talk to those doctors and reach out to people who know more than you do, because people are so willing to talk to you and teach you about what they're interested in and what they've spent their lives working on. And when you talk to those people, you can hone your own passions, and you can realize, maybe this is for me, maybe this isn't for me. But if you start young and you're ready and you do it while you're still a teenager and your mindsets are still developing, you're so much more ready for adulthood, and you're so much more ready for anything else you work on in your life, because you've understood what your passions are and you've worked for them, because there's nothing holding you back. Most of us, it's a privilege to have access to the internet, but when you do, you can Google anything online and you can research anything you want. So the one thing I would say is, don't let anything hold you back from learning when you're young, and just pursue your dreams no matter what age you are.
I love it. And I challenge older people also to still do the same. Don't let that curiosity die. Even if you think you're just stuck in this desk job and you're just going to be someone who's, keyboard pusher all day. If you got that curiosity, go and explore it. You're never too late to go do that. Navid, what's your advice for not only students, but for people who are struggling to innovate? There's a loaded question for you.
I think you have to just do something new. Einstein said something along the lines of, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome. Mm-hmm. And I think right now you can't do the same thing, and I don't think you can expect to do the same thing in 6 months from now. And so just do something different, whether it's, if you're a student, enroll in a new type of program. Maybe it's TKS, maybe it's an online course on Udacity or something. If you're a large enterprise company, maybe instead of trying to build your applications in-house, maybe you want to outsource it to another organization like TribalScale. Or maybe instead of working in your office and having a big fancy office space, maybe you want to try doing a remote culture plus maybe a hybrid with a different type of office structure, like I mentioned, with a focus space and a collaboration space, things like that. But I think it's just about trying new things and not being scared of the uncertainty, because uncertainty is not risk.
I love that. Uncertainty is not risk. Thank you so much, guys, for attending
Thank you.
our podcast today. Definitely going to be in touch. Want to do way more conversations like this. I found it completely insightful. I love it every time I chat with the TKS crew. I end up learning so much more. Actually, I end up learning more that makes me work better in my day just from you guys, which is, I feel like I want to enroll in the program and start to reinvent myself. No, so thank you so much for being on. The First Name Basis podcast is available on Apple, Google. We post it on LinkedIn, YouTube, all over the place. We'll get this edited really quickly and get it out there. But thank you again, guys, for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Bye, Sheetal.
Bye. Thank you.